In 1974, amidst a sandstorm sweeping across the Mojave, the Alvarez family vanished. No one saw them leave their ranch, nor were there any traces left on the dirt roads leading to the highway. The press summed it up in a single headline: "The desert swallowed them." The county police opened an investigation file for a few weeks before closing it, with a final note: no bodies, no clues, possible cause due to the sandstorm or extreme heat. Neighbors whispered about debts, suggesting the Alvarez family might have fled in the night, but in the official records, everything was dry and final, as if people could completely dissolve into the sand overnight. 40 years later, in the summer of 2014, a construction crew expanding a road south of the Mojave hit a metal obstruction deep beneath the sand. When the crane pulled it up, it was the Alvarez family's 1970 Ford farm truck, almost intact. Its silver paint covered in red dust, tires firmly embedded. The cabin was nearly airtight, sealed by sand packed tightly on all sides. When the door was pried open, the air reeked of rust and mildew. Inside, a seatbelt still held a human skeleton, its skull slumped against the steering wheel. On the floor, a rusted pistol lay mixed with the sand that had spilled in. Between the seat cushions, technicians found a 1974 receipt, yellowed but stained with blood, its text still legible: purchase of 2 meals, 2 coffees. This detail immediately rendered "the desert swallowed them" theory meaningless. The news spread quickly across the county. The police promptly contacted Miguel Alvarez, the only surviving son, who was 8 when he disappeared. Now in his 40s, Miguel was invited to the sheriff's office to confirm. For him, the old truck wasn't just an artifact buried under sand for 4 decades. It was the first evidence suggesting his family wasn't erased by nature, but might have been caught in a different story, one the 1974 records never documented. Miguel Alvarez stepped into the Mojave County Sheriff's archive room, where case files from the 1970s gathered dust on wooden shelves. His request to access his family's missing persons file took nearly a week to be approved. When the cardboard box labeled Alvarez 1974 was finally placed on the table, Miguel faced an unbelievable truth. Inside were just a few pages, with the official conclusion summed up in 3 words: desert claimed them. No crime scene maps, no photographs, no witness statements. A complex case, involving an entire family's disappearance, was reduced to an abstract hypothesis: sandstorm, heat, the harshness of the Mojave. The report began with a brief description: on June 17, 1974, a level 5 sandstorm swept through the valley, visibility near zero. The Alvarez family, husband, wife, and young child, was believed to have been trapped at the ranch before vanishing. The lead investigator concluded: no bodies found, likely swept away by wind or buried under sand. Notably, a single neighbor's testimony, claiming to have heard an engine starting in the middle of the stormy night, was excluded from the official report. Miguel turned to the next page, a memo from an agricultural insurance company. The company had paid out a substantial settlement for the Alvarez family's death, on the condition that the case be closed early to avoid impacting market confidence in the area. The signature of the sheriff at the time was scrawled below. The file was closed less than 8 months after the disappearance. The pressure from the insurance company became the official reason to halt all search efforts. But the discoveries in the buried truck shattered that hypothesis. A preliminary forensic report from 2014, tucked at the back of the file, stated clearly the pistol found in the cabin wasn't registered to any Alvarez family member. Its serial number was filed off, but its design suggested it was common among border criminals in the 1970s. This detail was entirely omitted from public disclosures. Even more significant was the receipt found in the cabin. Technicians noted the paper was yellowed, with a bloodstain in the corner, but the information was still legible. The date matched the night the Alvarez family vanished. Items listed: 2 meals, 2 coffees. A note added, inconsistent with the Alvarez family's habits, typically only bought 1 meal when going to town. This was direct evidence that a second person was in the truck that night. Miguel read the line repeatedly. No elaborate reasoning was needed. The presence of a stranger in the cabin was enough to dismantle the desert swallowed them theory. Instead of a family erased by nature, every sign pointed to them being victims of a human orchestrated plan. But why did no investigator pursue this lead? He continued scanning the appendix. A 1975 fax from the sheriff's office to the insurance company stated, "No evidence of foul play. Recommend closing investigation." A payment receipt showed $45,000 transferred to the legal heir, equivalent to the value of the farmland deemed lost. After that, the file stopped entirely. Miguel closed the folder, feeling both empty and enraged. The 3 words "desert claimed them" now seemed less like a conclusion and more like an excuse to bury the truth. A pistol with no owner, a receipt for 2 meals and 2 coffees, a truck buried under sand, all pieces of a completely different picture. The question was no longer whether the Alvarez family was swept away by the desert, but who was in the cabin with them that night, and why the entire system, from police to insurance, turned a blind eye to such obvious details. Miguel left the archive room with the thin file, his mind brimming with unanswered questions. The dry words in the records only reinforced that the entire town had chosen to believe the simple story: the desert swallowed the Alvarez family. But the truck under the sand, the untraceable rusted pistol, and the receipt for 2 meals, 2 coffees, proved otherwise. He needed a witness, someone who survived that fateful night. The list of people who once worked for the Alvarez ranch had dwindled to a few names. One was Elias Monroe, a hired worker who lived in the western shed of the ranch. Miguel drove to the outskirts of Mojave town, where Elias lived in an old mobile home. The man, now in his 70s, was gaunt with long, disheveled silver hair. When Miguel introduced himself, Elias took a moment to recognize him before nodding and inviting him inside. After some small talk, Miguel cut to the chase. "On the night of the 1974 sandstorm, did you hear or see anything unusual?" The question silenced Elias. He pulled an empty cigarette pack from his pocket, fidgeting with it before answering in a hoarse voice. "I heard gunshots. Not just one, then an engine starting, roaring over the wind." Miguel noted every detail. Elias continued, "I reported it to the police the next morning. Told them I heard shots at the Alvarez ranch. But they just wrote it down and said, I must have been mistaken. Sandstorms mess with your ears. No one ever followed up with me." This account was completely absent from the file Miguel had just reviewed. Instead of pursuing a direct witness, the police at the time dismissed it. Elias stood, rummaged through a drawer, and pulled out an old leather-bound notebook, its pages yellowed and filled with dense handwriting. "I knew it'd be needed someday," he said, placing it before Miguel. The notebook detailed records from the late 1960s to mid-1970s, dates, names, truck license plates. Elias had meticulously noted every stranger who appeared at the Alvarez ranch, most claiming to represent Morrison Development, the largest real estate company in Mojave at the time. The scrawled but clear entries read, March 12, 1973, green GMC truck, 2 men arrived, said they wanted to buy the east well. May 5, 1974, man named Carter, said he worked for Morrison, brought a contract. Alvarez refused to sign. June 14, 1974, same man returned, this time with 2 others, big argument in the yard. The entries stopped one day, before the Alvarez family vanished. Miguel flipped through the pages, spotting a clear pattern. Morrison Development repeatedly sent people to negotiate, pressuring to buy the farmer's well. The Alvarez ranch sat on one of Mojave's most vital groundwater veins. Refusing to sell made them a target. Elias confirmed, I saw Alvarez chase them off his land, saying he'd never sell the well to land dealers. Most striking was the notebook's final entry. A license plate, Nevada plate, 7K, 3921. Elaine's clearly remembered this vehicle parked near the ranch every night, once even spotting someone waiting inside. I don't know who they were, but they were always tied to Morrison, Elias said. When Miguel asked why he stayed silent for 40 years, Elias sighed. Because when I told the police, no one cared. Besides, Morrison controlled almost everything in this town, bought off officials, police, even the press. Speaking out would have only brought trouble. What Miguel received wasn't just a story, but written evidence. A notebook Elias had kept secret for decades. It proved that before the Alvarez family vanished, they faced direct pressure from Morrison Development over the well, and on the night of the sandstorm, there were gunshots and a vehicle leaving, details completely at odds with the desert swallowed them theory in the official file. Leaving the mobile home, Miguel knew he held the first critical piece, a forgotten witness's testimony, and a meticulously kept notebook revealing Morrison Development's shady activities just before his family disappeared. Miguel and Elias returned to the abandoned land where the Alvarez ranch once stood. Sand had covered the foundation, leaving only a few bare wooden frames. Elias led the way to the northern corner, where he recalled the ranch's main well was located. After hours of digging, they uncovered an unusually thick concrete circle buried under the sandy soil. Upon close inspection, the concrete showed signs of rough gravel and cement mixing, not a natural formation. Drill marks and cuts around it indicated the well had been deliberately sealed. Miguel contacted a geological survey team to investigate. Sonar equipment revealed that beneath the concrete, the groundwater vein remained active with stable pressure. This confirmed the well had been functional and valuable until it was sealed. The technician estimated the concrete was poured in the mid-1970s, coinciding with the Alvarez family's disappearance. A perfectly functioning well completely sealed was an act nature couldn't explain. Soon after, Miguel visited the county land management office to cross-reference records. In a 1976 file, a document stated the Alvarez well's ownership had been transferred to a real estate company. The contract bore the title Morrison Development Company, signed on March 12, 1976. The signature for the farmer was listed as Antonio Alvarez, but a legal expert noted the handwriting showed signs of forgery, inconsistent with Alvarez's bank documents and tax records. A court stamp validated the transfer, accompanied by the signature of a district official from the time. The contract notably specified the purpose, planning groundwater resources in the Mojave region. There were no clauses regarding compensation or the value of assets paid to the Alvarez family. In the list of signatories for the company, the name Jack Morrison, CEO of Morrison Development, appeared multiple times. A series of other records from the same year showed at least 3 other farmers' wells were transferred to the company between 1975 and 1977, coinciding with the disappearances of those families. Elias confirmed he had seen Morrison's employees visit the Alvarez ranch multiple times, bringing contracts and repeatedly making threats. In his notebook, an entry from May 5, 1974, clearly stated, Carter Morrison representative, came with 2 strangers, demanded the well be sold. Alvarez refused. These notes perfectly matched the land records uncovered later. When cross-referencing data from the management agency, Miguel discovered another detail. During that period, Morrison Development registered multiple real estate projects in Mojave, all located near groundwater veins. This reinforced the hypothesis that sealing wells and seizing water sources was part of a larger plan. The geological report, transfer records, and Elias's testimony formed a consistent chain of evidence. The Alvarez well was deliberately sealed after the family vanished, and ownership was transferred to Morrison Development through documents showing signs of forgery. Jack Morrison's name recurred in multiple documents, positioning him as the central figure in the entire water acquisition process. The land where the well was sealed is now just a cracked concrete pit in the desert. Technicians concluded the well was over 20 meters deep, with water still flowing strongly below. Had it not been sealed, it could have supplied the region for decades. Sealing the well was not only an act of appropriation, but also an effort to erase evidence, as no other farmer in the area would voluntarily destroy their sole lifeline. All collected evidence from the site and archives pointed to one conclusion: The well didn't vanish due to nature, but by human hands. And those hands belonged to Jack Morrison, head of Morrison Development, the largest real estate company in Mojave at the time. In early 2015, just months after the Alvarez well was confirmed to be sealed with concrete, another discovery shook the entire town of Mojave. While extracting sand to expand a federal highway running along the desert's eastern edge, a construction crew reported their excavator hitting a large metal object buried deep in the sand. As the machine continued digging, the familiar shape of a truck emerged. Initially, they thought it was an abandoned vehicle, but when the sand was cleared and the cracked windshield revealed, the faded logo on the door silenced everyone. It was a 1972 Ford truck with Nevada plate 7D4912. Matching the license plate of the Palmer family, farmers who mysteriously vanished in the summer of 1978. The county police immediately sealed the site and had the truck towed to the forensic warehouse. The initial report noted a condition similar to the Alvarez truck. Sand filled the cabin. The steel was heavily rusted, but the frame remained intact. The difference lay inside the cabin. On the back seat, investigators found a rotted floral fabric bag containing a few personal items. A cracked porcelain doll, a family album with faded photos, and scraps of paper listing shopping items. All were identified as belonging to Mrs. Palmer and her two daughters, who lived at a ranch nearly 20 miles from the site. A detailed examination of the vehicle revealed suspicious signs. On the rear seat base, remnants of an old rope were found, partially coiled, one end tied tightly to the seat frame with a double knot, a type often used for binding. On the rear door panel, technicians noted deep, parallel scratches, as if someone had tried to claw at it with a hard object from the inside. Beneath the sand, mixed into the floor mat, they found a small piece of wood, likely from a club handle. All suggested the occupants may have been restrained and resisted before the vehicle was buried in the desert. A particularly crucial detail was found in the glove compartment, an old geological map, marked in red ink, with multiple well locations in the Mojave area. Some symbols matched the Alvarez well, and others Elias had recorded in his notebook. In the map's corner, a handwritten note in smudged ink read, "Well 17. Morrison offer again." This was direct evidence that the Palmer family had also been targeted by Morrison Development to sell their well and had refused. Miguel was present at the sheriff's office when the Palmer truck was unsealed. He witnessed each item being removed and documented. The striking similarities to the Alvarez case forced the 1978 missing persons file to be reopened. The old report had claimed the Palmer family fled due to financial difficulties after a prolonged drought. But now, with the truck buried under sand, the well map, and signs of restraint, the runaway narrative was entirely implausible. The county police's expanded investigation revealed the Palmer family also owned a deep well connected to the same groundwater system as the Alvarez well. Land records from 1979 showed the Palmer well was transferred to Morrison Development just 1 year after their disappearance, mirroring the Alvarez case. The signature representing the family on the documents was also suspected of forgery, but was still approved by the district court. When comparing data from both cases, a pattern emerged clearly. The missing families were all owners of wells on Mojave's main groundwater veins. After their disappearances, well ownership was transferred to Morrison Development through legal documents. Witness Elias confirmed he had seen Morrison's employees negotiate with the Palmers multiple times, with heated arguments in the ranch yard just weeks before they vanished. Local media quickly published the new findings. A desert region newspaper ran the headline, "Another farm truck found. How many families did Mojave swallow?" The public began questioning whether the prior disappearances were natural, suspecting a systematic effort to seize water resources. Photos of the excavated Palmer Ford spread rapidly. The community was stunned by the children's toys, photo album, and well map found in the truck, evidence this was no mere accident. From the Alvarez and Palmer cases, police compiled a list of missing farming families over 3 decades, exceeding 10 cases, all tied to critical wells. The discovery of the Palmer truck turned suspicion into concrete accusations. The consecutive similarities between two cases 4 years apart couldn't be coincidental. The series of disappearances was clearly linked to controlling groundwater, with Morrison development emerging as the central link. With the second truck found, the Alvarez case was no longer an isolated mystery, but the start of a decades-long criminal pattern in Mojave. After the Palmer family's truck was towed to the forensic warehouse, Miguel immediately wanted to verify the most critical clue, the geological map found in the glove compartment. If it was just a map bought in town, its value was limited, but if it was linked to the Groundwater Management Agency, it meant the Palmer family knew something before they vanished. The next day, Miguel visited the county archives, a small 1950s building with only a few staff. In the document storage, hundreds of rolled-up maps and blueprints were organized by year. After nearly 3 hours of searching, Miguel found a set of Mojave groundwater maps issued by the State Geological Agency in 1972. When he unrolled the large map on the table, the details sent chills down his spine. The map showed groundwater veins traced in winding blue lines, running deep under sand and rock. Dozens of red dots marked key wells. Miguel cross-checked and realized all wells belonging to families who vanished over 3 decades. Alvarez 1974, Palmer 1978, and others like Howard, Mills, Sanchez were prominently marked in red. In contrast, wells acquired by Morrison Development were circled in black, a distinct symbol. In the bottom right corner, a handwritten note in blue ink read simply, M.D. Company. This symbol recurred beside multiple wells, proving the map was used to track the acquisition process. It wasn't just administrative paperwork, it was a battle plan for an entire scheme. Miguel photographed the entire map, marking locations matching the disappearances. Comparing it with Elias Monroe's notebook, he found complete alignment. Each time Elias noted Morrison sending negotiators, those wells were already red-dotted on the map. This meant the plan was meticulously prepared from the start, with farmers as targets on a list. In the records accompanying the map, Miguel found a 1975 internal county report emphasizing the need to redistribute water resources and recommending collaboration with private companies for more efficient exploitation. The document bore a county official's signature with a handwritten note in the margin, "Refer to M.D. Company." This was clear evidence that Morrison Development didn't act alone, but had the consent, even coordination, of local authorities. When Miguel presented the findings to a retired geologist, the expert confirmed the map's official origin, impossible to forge. He pointed to the symbols. Red means surveyed wells with high potential. If all red wells vanished with their owners, it's no longer a coincidence, it's a systematic campaign. From Alvarez to Palmer and numerous others, the pattern was clear. Morrison Development marked wells, sent negotiators. If owners agreed to sell, deals were legal. If they refused, they disappeared, and wells were transferred via forged documents. The outcome was always the same. Morrison gained control of another water source. Reviewing land tax records, Miguel noted that within 15 years, Morrison Development controlled nearly 70% of Mojave's critical wells. From a mid-tier real estate company, they became the region's dominant force, wielding enough power to influence water prices and industrial projects. Old newspapers in the town library further fueled suspicion. In 1979, an article praised Jack Morrison as the pioneer turning Mojave from desert to a thriving region. No mention was made of the vanished farmers. Instead, Morrison appeared at every public event, cutting ribbons, donating to police and hospitals. The image of a successful entrepreneur completely overshadowed the dark past. But with this map, everything changed. No longer rumors or stories, it was direct evidence of a systematic water acquisition network. Each red dot was a well, each well tied to a family, and each family vanished under the same script. The M.D. Company note was like a criminal signature, coldly present on the map, confirming the sole orchestrating hand, Morrison Development. Miguel carefully copied the map, sealed the evidence, and prepared to cross-reference it with other land records. The chain of events from Alvarez to Palmer, from sealed wells to buried trucks, was now linked by a single thread, a decades-long Mojave water takeover scheme led by Jack Morrison, shielded by political power and the desert's silence. The map from the county archives opened a new investigative path, but to prove Morrison wasn't just appropriating but directly involved in the disappearances, Miguel needed testimony from someone inside the network. Elias suggested a name, Beth Briggs, widow of Roy Briggs, a worker for Morrison Development through the 1970s. Roy died in a 1989 workplace accident, but town rumors suggested his death wasn't straightforward. Elias insisted Roy once vaguely confessed to driving to bury things that shouldn't be buried in Mojave. Miguel visited the small brick house where Beth Briggs lived in seclusion. The woman in her 60s, frail with a haggard face, initially refused to talk. Only when Miguel mentioned Alvarez and Palmer did Beth open the door, her eyes wary. In the cramped living room, she placed an old wooden box on the table. "He died carrying too many secrets," Beth said, her voice trembling, then opened the box to reveal dozens of envelopes. Inside were checks, each for $500, issued by Morrison Development, starting in 1990, right after Roy's death, and continuing for 20 years. Beth called them survival money. She said, "I had no choice. He was gone, and I had to raise 3 kids. They sent money, I took it. In return, I stayed silent." When Miguel asked what she was silent about, Beth lowered her head and recounted. According to her, Roy confessed one drunken night that he helped bury at least 2 farm trucks under the sand. The work happened after major sandstorms, when visibility was low and roads were obscured. Morrison chose the desert because sand is the perfect accomplice, Beth recalled. Storms hide tire tracks, even sounds. In a few days, the trucks vanished like they never existed. Roy didn't name victims but mentioned families who refused to sell wells. She recalled him returning late one night, clothes dusted with sand, hands swollen and red, saying only, "They'll never be found." After that, he lived haunted, often avoiding going out during sandstorm warnings. Beth believed what he buried wasn't just trucks and bodies, but the conscience that slowly broke him. Miguel requested to keep some checks as evidence. Beth agreed, provided the investigation was official so she could live without fear. She said, Morrison sent someone to deliver money to her door every month, never late, as both support and a warning. "If I stopped taking it, they'd know I talked," she said. Her confession was fully recorded. In the recording, Beth confirmed Morrison not only knew, but directly ordered the selection of burial sites. He commanded actions be taken during stormy nights when police and residents were sheltered. A trusted crew, including Roy, drove victims' vehicles to deep sand areas, dug pits, and buried them before dawn. This happened repeatedly through the 1970s and 1980s. Beth also provided a detail. Roy once kept a small notebook with notes about the burial trips. After his death, it vanished. Beth believed Morrison had it taken to erase evidence. However, the intact checks, issued continuously, were proof that Morrison maintained hush money for years. Comparing Beth's testimony with the groundwater map, Miguel found the burial locations she described matched red-marked areas. This further confirmed Morrison ran an organized acquisition system, from pressuring well sales to eliminating those who refused. With the widow's confession, the Alvarez and Palmer files now had a direct witness to the burial methods. Beth not only confirmed Morrison's involvement, but detailed the process, choosing the desert, exploiting sandstorms, and using loyal workers to execute. Miguel left Beth's house with the checks and recording. To investigators, this was the strongest evidence yet that Morrison Development wasn't just shady, but directly tied to the series of Mojave farmer disappearances. The Morrison Development checks and Beth Briggs's confession gave Miguel a solid framework to link the disappearances. But reviewing old articles in the local archives, he noticed another detail. During the time the farming families vanished, Southern California newspapers frequently ran stories about the Mojave curse, sudden sandstorms, that could swallow vehicles, homes, even people. The articles described the Mojave Desert as a living entity, sand that swallows people, leading the public to believe the disappearances were merely the result of harsh nature. The phrase was repeated in headlines, official statements, and even police reports. Miguel shuddered as he recalled that his family's file contained just 3 words. Desert claimed them. Cross-referencing financial records, Miguel discovered Morrison Development directly funded a Mojave Climate Phenomenon Research Fund in 1975. This coincided with the media's heavy focus on the desert-swallowing narrative. Internal documents from the county accounting office revealed Morrison contributed a significant sum to the local police to support public safety communication during sandstorm season. In reality, these campaigns emphasized natural causes, dismissing any human involvement. Miguel compared this evidence with former reporters who covered the stories at the time. A retired journalist named Howard recounted that much of the news was pre-directed. We received press releases from the police, sometimes with notes from Morrison Development. They instructed us to highlight sandstorms and drought, ignoring crime or land disputes. Howard also recalled a young reporter who questioned the series of farmer disappearances but was quickly reassigned to another beat. Elias Monroe, hearing Miguel read the old articles, nodded in confirmation. Mojave folks already believed in the sand as some kind of spirit. Morrison just amplified it, turning it into the official explanation for every disappearance. The evidence clearly showed the local legend was deliberately exploited. Miguel carefully noted, Morrison didn't just conceal crimes with force, but with information and cultural beliefs. When everyone believed sand could swallow people, no one looked for perpetrators. The police easily closed cases, and the public accepted it as the desert's harsh fate. Another document Miguel found in the county archives was even more shocking. A 1977 internal memo from the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department listing funding sources for operations with Morrison Development at the top. The memo, signed by the sheriff at the time, confirmed the funds were used to maintain community awareness campaigns about natural risks. This proved Morrison bribed law enforcement to uphold a single narrative: the desert was the culprit. Pieced together, the picture was clear. Morrison exploited a local legend to create a smokescreen. They turned sand that swallows people into the official reason in records, forcing insurance payouts while convincing the public it was nothing but nature's cruelty. Meanwhile, trucks carrying farmers' bodies and belongings were buried deep in the sand, exactly as planned. Miguel copied all the articles, preserved the financial memos, and decided to submit them with Beth Briggs's testimony. This was no longer a fragmented story of individual disappearances, but a systematic criminal campaign, with the Mojave legend used as a tool to conceal it. The pieces were becoming clearer: wells seized, families vanished, support payments to police and media, and a legend turned into a cover for a series of murders. All pointed to one name: Jack Morrison. The evidence of Morrison exploiting the sand swallows people legend convinced Miguel that the disappearances weren't just quick eliminations, but might hide deeper layers of violence. Elias suggested a place, an abandoned warehouse once part of the Alvarez ranch, a few miles off the main road. In the 1970s, workers had seen Morrison's trucks coming and going at night. The two went in the sweltering Mojave afternoon, with hot sand and gusts of red dust swirling. The warehouse appeared, its tin roof half collapsed, wooden doors rotted, but the interior still showed signs of deliberate use. Sweeping a flashlight, Miguel noticed the cement floor wasn't smooth, but bore grinding marks, as if heavy objects had been dragged. In a corner, rusted iron chains were strewn across the floor. Bending down, Elias pointed out darkened cement patches, likely where blood had soaked in and been scraped away. Along the western wall, small black pockmarks dotted the surface. Miguel probed with an iron rod, realizing they were bullet holes embedded in the brick. The firing trajectory suggested shots were fired inside the space. Searching further, they found a small hollow behind a shifted wooden panel. Inside was a rusted wooden-handled knife, its blade stained with dried black residue. Tucked with it was a torn piece of fabric, its stitching and material matching the work shirts of 1970s Mojave farmers. Miguel sealed it in an evidence bag. The warehouse exuded an eerie chill. Every detail suggested it was used to detain and interrogate farmers who resisted selling their wells. Elias recalled, "That year, I heard screams from this direction during a sandstorm night. I reported it to the police, but the next morning they said I mistook the wind's howl." Now, physical evidence proved he wasn't mistaken. In another corner, Miguel found scraps of rotted rope, still tied to a wooden beam supporting the roof. The thick rope showed fraying from heavy friction, likely used to bind people. On an old wooden table, a lighter engraved with MD Co. remained, matching the Morrison development symbol Miguel had seen on the county office's hidden map. The pieces grew clearer. Farmers weren't just coldly eliminated, but were held here, interrogated to force land sales or reveal well details. Only when they refused to yield were they buried in the desert. Miguel photographed every detail, carefully packing the evidence for the county police. Elias stood beside him, eyes tense. "This isn't just rumors anymore," he said. "This is where they vanished." Leaving the warehouse, Miguel glanced back at the perforated tin roof, the cold chains dangling on the walls. The place had stood silent for 40 years, but the traces of crime remained, as if the Mojave Desert had witnessed it all, and only now began to reveal the truth. The evidence from the abandoned warehouse strengthened Miguel's belief that the network eliminating farmers wasn't random. But to prove Morrison Development was the mastermind, he needed another piece, the money trail. Money would show who gave orders and who profited. A week later, Elias called Miguel, saying someone wanted to meet secretly. It was Harold Jensen, a retired accountant who worked for Morrison Development in the late 1970s. He appeared at a roadside diner, clutching an old leather satchel. Jensen glanced around nervously, then slid a nylon-wrapped stack of documents to Miguel. "I've kept these for 40 years. They thought I burned them, but I held on to them in case the truth needed to come out." Inside were Morrison Development's financial ledgers from 1974 to 1982. The yellowed pages bore clear handwritten entries and audit stamps. Sitting at a corner table, Miguel and Elias flipped through, quickly noticing a pattern. Each time a farming family vanished, the ledger recorded an unusual expense. For example, in November 1974, when the Alvarez family disappeared, a land processing fee of $15,000 was logged, noted as completed. In 1978, when the Palmer family and their Ford truck vanished, a $22,000 expense was listed for safety costs. Case closed. By the early 1980s, whenever rumors surfaced, the ledger showed community support payments, actually untraceable cash disbursements. The most shocking entry was under security fees. From 1975 to 1982, nearly every year recorded payments to the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office, ranging from $2,000 to $10,000 per quarter, a massive sum for the time. Miguel turned to an appendix, seeing Jack Morrison's signature approving multiple entries. Jensen explained, "This was how he bought them off. I was told to legitimize it as construction site security costs. But in reality, the money went to the sheriff and some deputies. In return, reports about missing farmers were closed quickly. No one asked further questions." Beyond security fees, the ledger revealed a money laundering network. Morrison Development logged huge investments in residential projects and infrastructure works. But Jensen confirmed most projects were never built. Instead, funds were funneled into underground well systems. Many wells were registered under subsidiary companies, then sold to the city or private investors at multiplied prices. Miguel took detailed notes, cross-referencing with the well map he'd found earlier. Sure enough, red-marked locations appeared in the ledger. Expenses for water surveys, acquisition rights, and technical costs, all aligning with vanished families. Another page was particularly damning. A 1979 detailed statement listed maintenance at Garrison Sandlot, $7,500. This was the exact area where the two trucks were later found. Morrison's spending on maintenance for a plot with no projects, coinciding with a family's disappearance, clearly indicated company funds were used for burial operations. Jensen also provided an internal audit report marked confidential, where a young employee flagged irregular security expenses. The report was crossed out in red with a handwritten note, "No further discussion." The signature below was Jack Morrison's. Miguel realized this evidence was as weighty as the gun and chains in the warehouse. If these ledgers went public, they would directly implicate Morrison Development and expose collusion with local police. Elias whispered, "The whole town was bought off. Everyone thought sand swallowed people. But it was Morrison swallowing everything." Miguel didn't respond, only continued photographing each page and sealing them. Leaving the diner, Jensen gripped Miguel's hand. "Be careful. I stayed silent for 40 years out of fear. They have eyes everywhere. But now the truth needs to come out." He left, leaving Miguel and Elias with documents heavy as a ticking bomb. From the torture warehouse, Beth Briggs's confession, to the leaked financial ledgers, the picture grew clear. Morrison ran a vast system, eliminating farmers, burying bodies in sand, bribing police and laundering money through real estate and groundwater projects. It all stemmed from greed for the precious water veins beneath the Mojave Desert. The financial ledgers from Harold Jensen gave Miguel and Elias unprecedented evidence. But just as they prepared to turn everything over to the county sheriff's office, Miguel received a late-night call from an unknown number. The line crackled with static, and a hoarse man's voice spoke, "Your father wasn't the only one." Miguel froze, but before he could ask, the voice continued. "Check the missing persons files from 1968 to 1990. You'll see. They're all tied to wells. Don't trust anyone in the sheriff's office. They're paid to forget." The line cut off, leaving a cold, long beep. Elias quickly noted the number, but the screen showed unknown. Miguel decided to follow the lead. The next morning, they went to the county archives, requesting access to civilian missing persons files. The clerk hesitated, but Elias, a local worker for years, used connections to gain approval. In the dusty room filled with yellowed files, Miguel sifted through reports. 1968 file. The Hartley family, owners of a large well near the Mojave vein, vanished after a sandstorm. Report conclusion, natural disaster. No bodies found. 1971 file. The Ortega family, 5 members, disappeared while hauling produce to market. Their truck was never found. The file noted their well was the deepest in the area, yielding double the average water output. 1978 file. The Palmer family, already known to Miguel from the recently unearthed truck. Their well was valued as the region's highest before their disappearance. 1983 file. The Ramirez family vanished after a stormy night. Their well was bought by Morrison Development a month later at an unusually low price. Each file repeated a pattern: valuable well, family refused to sell, disappeared without a trace. Police concluded, Mojave natural disaster. As Miguel and Elias compiled the data, it wasn't just a few isolated cases. From 1968 to 1990, at least 12 farming families vanished. All shared one trait: wells on the main Mojave vein. Elias shuddered looking at Miguel's list. This is a systematic campaign. Not just Alvarez, not just Palmer. They wiped out an entire community to seize water. Miguel nodded, his eyes fixed on a note in the Hartley file. At the bottom, faint handwriting read, "Sheriff reported receiving support from MD Company, Morrison Development again." Leaving the archives, Miguel realized a chilling detail: the anonymous caller knew the network intimately to provide those dates. That hoarse voice wasn't just a warning, it was guiding Miguel to dig deeper. Elias whispered, "Maybe someone from inside the network, a worker, or someone paid off like Roy Briggs. But why contact you now?" Miguel didn't answer. He knew the further they went, the more they became targets. Still, the anonymous call clarified one thing. The Alvarez case was just a piece of a 12-family disappearance chain spanning over 2 decades. The script was always the same: a sandstorm as cover, wells changing hands, police closing files, Morrison development expanding control over Mojave's water. Miguel photographed each file, saving copies. He understood that to crack the case, this list of 12 missing families must be the foundation, proving they were all victims of the same plot. On the drive back, Miguel's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He put it on speaker with Elias listening. The same hoarse voice, briefer this time. If you want real evidence, check the North Warehouse, Friday night. Come alone. Then it cut off. Miguel gripped the steering wheel tightly. The caller knew he was investigating, knew his next steps. It meant they were being watched. Elias looked out the window, sighing. We've stirred a hornet's nest, but at least we know now. Your father wasn't alone. An entire community was erased. The yellowed files, the cryptic call, and the list of 12 missing farming families all confirmed one thing. The truth still lay deep beneath the Mojave sand, and someone in the shadows was deciding when it would be revealed. The yellowed files and anonymous call made Miguel and Elias realize they were touching a systematic crime chain spanning over 2 decades. But before they could plan to report the new evidence, devastating news struck. On Friday morning, the car radio blared a brief report. A local woman died in a house fire. The victim was identified as Beth Briggs, 64. Miguel swerved sharply, his heart sinking. Elias, sitting beside him, muttered, another one silenced. When they arrived at the scene, the small brick house where Beth had tremblingly handed over the checks was now a smoldering pile of ash, with smoke still rising faintly. Police, firefighters, and a few reporters stood around, but all kept their distance. A fire officer noted that the front and back doors were locked from the outside, the locks warped by heat, but showing signs of deliberate bolting. There was no way she could have escaped on her own, he confirmed. Miguel froze when he saw a charred piece of wood on the lawn, faintly bearing the inscription, MD Co., likely a crate from Morrison Development, used to douse the fire with gasoline. Elias stood motionless, then said clearly, this is a cleanup. Morrison is erasing witnesses. Neighbors recounted that Beth was acting normally the previous evening, even calling her sister in Arizona. There were no signs she intended to take her own life. A woman living nearby recalled seeing the lights of an unfamiliar truck parked in front of Beth's house at midnight, leaving shortly after. Everything aligned with a staged scenario, doors locked from outside, a quick blaze, and departure before the fire erupted. Miguel realized the fire wasn't just to kill Beth, but a message to anyone considering speaking out. The checks Beth had given him were now the only surviving evidence. Had he not preserved them, the entire story would have been buried forever. Elias glanced at the crowd of police at the scene and whispered, "Notice that? They're standing there, but no one's investigating seriously. They know Morrison's involved, but they stay silent, just like 40 years ago." Miguel said nothing, but his mind raced. The fire proved the network was still active, with operatives ready to strike and still protected. A firefighter covertly slipped Miguel a preliminary report. In the living room, Beth's body was found pinned against the door, indicating she tried to escape, but couldn't. The house showed traces of a melted plastic gas can. Most critically, the fire's ignition was estimated at 2:45 a.m., exactly when the anonymous caller had instructed Miguel to go to the North Warehouse. Elias growled, "That wasn't a meeting, it was a trap. They wanted to split us up to take out Beth." Miguel clutched the evidence folder tightly. Beth's death by fire not only eliminated a key witness, but signaled that Morrison still controlled the game, ready to erase traces with blood and smoke. The discoveries, money laundering ledgers, the well map, the warehouse chains, now felt even more dangerous. That night, they sat in a small Barstow motel room, lights off, only a flashlight casting shadows on the table. Miguel spread out the evidence, Beth's recorded confession, the checks, warehouse photos, leaked ledgers, and files on the 12 missing families. Elias lit a cigarette, his voice heavy. "We don't have much time. Morrison knows what we have. and he won't stop until every witness is gone. Outside, the desert wind howled through the window, carrying the acrid smell of ash from Beth's house. Miguel wrote a brief but haunting line in his investigation report. Beth Briggs died in a fire. Doors locked from outside. Clear evidence of witness elimination. Fear, the network is still active. After Beth Briggs's house fire, Miguel returned to the old Alvarez ranch to re-examine remaining items. In a cracked wooden shed, among moldy grain sacks and rusted farm tools, he found a small metal box hidden in a wall crevice. Inside were old photos, a short notebook, and a discolored cassette tape labeled simply November 1974. Miguel brought the tape to Barstow. Elias borrowed an old cassette player from a thrift shop. They inserted the tape and pressed play. The first sound was howling wind, a roaring engine interspersed with silence. Then a deep male voice, clearly Miguel's father, Mr. Alvarez, came through, recording like a diary. They came again tonight. They want us to sign the well over, but this is our ancestors' land. This water sustains our family. We can't sell. After a few seconds, another voice cut in, cold and authoritative. Later analysis confirmed it was Jack Morrison. He said, "You know the consequences of refusing. Your well sits on the Mojave vein, worth more than anything you grow. Don't be foolish. Sign, and your family will be safe." The next sound was Alvarez's firm reply. "We're not selling. This is our land and water. Your dirty money can't buy it." A chair toppled. A loud bang on a table. Then Morrison's voice growled, "You've made your choice. Don't blame me." A chaotic flurry followed, struggling footsteps, a door slamming open. Then a gunshot rang out, sharp and clear in the room. The recorder kept running, capturing an engine starting and speeding off, before the tape fell into a long silence. With only the desert wind outside, Elias noted the time immediately. The tape's label matched the November 1974 sandstorm night, when the Alvarez family vanished. Miguel replayed it multiple times, transcribing each segment. Morrison's voice matched the tone, breathing, and diction of his archived 1980s press recordings. They took the tape to an independent audio lab in Los Angeles. The forensic report confirmed the cassette was original, with no signs of tampering, and the recording device matched common 1970s cassette players. Experts compared it to a 1981 public recording of Jack Morrison from a press conference. The frequency and voice patterns matched. The tape became the first direct evidence linking Morrison to a shooting that led to a Mojave farmer's death. Before, there were only testimonies, vague files, or indirect clues. Now, a recording captured the entire sequence, the threat, the refusal, and the gunshot. Elias cross-referenced it with the financial ledgers leaked by Harold Jensen. Indeed, in November 1974, a land processing fee of $15,000 was logged. Around the same time, newspapers reported the Alvarez family vanished in a sandstorm. The data now aligned. Morrison personally went to the ranch to pressure Alvarez, who refused. Morrison fired the shot, then used his crew and the sandstorm to cover the tracks. Miguel made multiple copies of the tape, sending one to a lawyer, one to the county prosecutor's office, and keeping the original in a secure safe. Every second of the tape turned it into golden evidence, not only proving Morrison development concealed crimes, but pinpointing the direct perpetrator of one of Mojave's gravest disappearances in 1974. The tape's forensic analysis confirmed undeniably the voice was Jack Morrison's. But to move the case forward, Miguel knew he needed to confront the man who ordered his father's death. After weeks of tracking, he learned Morrison, now in his 80s, still lived in a sprawling Palm Springs mansion, surrounded by high walls, security cameras, and iron gates. Despite his age, Morrison maintained the image of a powerful real estate mogul, attending political fundraisers and charity events. One afternoon, Miguel approached the gate, introducing himself and requesting an interview about the Mojave disappearances. Surprisingly, Morrison summoned him inside. In a marble-floored living room, Morrison sat in a large leather chair, his silver hair contrasting with his sharp demeanor. He raised an eyebrow at Miguel. Alvarez, still some Alvarez left daring to ask questions? Miguel kept a small recorder running in his pocket. The conversation began calmly, with Morrison talking about the desert's harshness and families, unable to adapt, who abandoned their land. Miguel presented copies of the 12 missing family files from 1968 to 1990. Morrison flipped through, smirking faintly. You think an 80-year-old like me could swallow all of Mojave? The desert buries more than you think. People, trucks, even truths. Sand covers all traces. Miguel didn't mention the cassette yet, instead asking about the security fees in the financial ledgers. Morrison shrugged. Project protection costs. That's all. If the police took a few bucks, it was to keep order. He sipped his drink, his voice lowering. You should let this rest. Digging only makes life harder. Sand isn't the only thing that can bury you. The threat was recorded verbatim. Miguel stayed silent, letting Morrison's arrogance take over. He continued, Your father chose wrong. He thought he could stand against us, and now you're on the same path. Ask yourself, how many Mojave folks vanished? You think it's all random? No. But no one's found anything in 40 years. That's because I know how to make the sand speak for me. Miguel asked a few more questions, but Morrison grew impatient. He stood, leaning on a cane, stepping closer. You've got nothing but rumors and imagination. I've got lawyers, police, and this whole town in my pocket. If you're smart, you'll leave tonight, and forget the name Morrison. Before leaving, Miguel gave a curt farewell. Morrison smiled coldly, adding, Remember, Mojave doesn't just swallow people. It swallows the curious too. As the iron gate closed behind him, Miguel was certain the 1974 cassette and this new recording would form a chain of evidence spanning 4 decades, ensuring Jack Morrison couldn't escape responsibility. After confronting Jack Morrison, Miguel immediately shared the recordings with Elias and a community legal team. Comparing them with existing documents, a new link emerged. In the leaked Morrison development files, Harold Jensen had mentioned land contracts with forged signatures. Elias took Miguel to the San Bernardino County Archives, where original land transfer records from the 1970s were stored. In the dim archive room, they pulled out a thick file labeled 1974, 1982. Multiple farmland purchase contracts were bundled together, most noting voluntary transfer of well exploitation rights. But the shocking detail was the signatures. On the Alvarez family's land transfer contract, the signature wasn't Mr. Alvarez's but a forgery, shaky handwriting, entirely different from other personal documents. Moreover, the notarization bore signatures from the Barstow mayor and San Bernardino County sheriff at the time. Official records confirmed both had witnessed the legal signing. These signatures turned forged documents into legal proof, allowing Morrison Development to swiftly seize wells after the Alvarez family vanished. Miguel kept searching. The 1978 Palmer family file followed a similar pattern, a forged signature for Mr. Palmer, verified by the same sheriff. This time, a city notary was included, but their professional record vanished from the notary list the following year. Tracing further, Elias found the notary died in a car accident soon after. The list of forged contracts extended to all 12 families. Each case shared a trait. Documents were notarized by local authorities and entered into the legal system days after the families were declared missing. More alarmingly, Miguel discovered some involved officials were still in power. The deputy mayor from that era was now a city council member. A former deputy sheriff who signed off on the 1971 Ortega file was currently a security consultant for a Morrison Development subsidiary. This explained why disappearance investigations always ended quickly with natural accident or desert swallowed them conclusions. Miguel and Elias compiled all evidence, copies of land contracts, forged signatures, official notarizations. Pieced together, a collusive network emerged. Morrison Development provided money, local authorities legitimized documents, and police ensured no investigation went further. A handwriting expert was brought in. He confirmed at least 7 owner signatures were forged, likely by a single Morrison insider. The forensic report showed systematic forgery, not random errors. When Miguel shared this with an independent journalism group, a reporter exclaimed, "This isn't just murder, it's government-level corruption." This discovery fully explained why, for 4 decades, numerous Mojave farming families vanished, and cases were always closed with 3 words: natural accident. The forged land contracts, signed by the former mayor and sheriff, proved Morrison Development wasn't alone, but protected by local authorities. But Elias, reviewing the entire file chain, recalled a detail he'd overlooked for years. "I saw Morrison with someone in Los Angeles," Elias said, his voice hoarse. "In 1979, at a bar near Route 66. It was Tony Castellano." The name immediately caught Miguel's attention. Castellano was frequently mentioned in late 1970s and early 1980s California news as a mafia boss controlling drug trafficking and gambling in Los Angeles. At first, Miguel thought Elias might be mistaken. But checking leaked National Archives documents, he found a 1980 FBI report. Anthony Castellano, aka Tony Castellano, showed signs of indirect investment in Mojave land projects through Morrison Development. The report detailed that Castellano funneled hundreds of thousands in cash into Morrison's real estate companies. These investments weren't publicly declared, but appeared in bank records as community development contributions. The FBI suspected this was part of Castellano's drug money laundering network, using real estate and well exploitation rights to legitimize illegal profits. Miguel and Elias reviewed Jensen's ledgers. Indeed, multiple external investments were logged in 1979, 1981, during the FBI's Castellano surveillance. These funds were converted into land purchase costs, security fees, and well operation expenses, all tied to Mojave farmer disappearances. Elias added, "I remember Morrison and Castellano with a convoy of black Cadillacs. I thought they were just business partners. Now it's clear, it was the mafia." This was reinforced when Miguel found a 1982 FBI memo confirming Castellano expanded drug control from the Mexican border to California, using Mojave as a transit hub. Well water wasn't just for farming, but for setting up temporary camps, hiding stash houses, and covering transport operations. FBI maps from that year showed drug trafficking routes passing through Mojave. Morrison Development, with vast land ownership, provided warehouses and legal cover. Castellano supplied cash and an underground network. This partnership turned Mojave into a link in California's mafia chain. Miguel compiled everything: forged contracts, financial ledgers, Morrison's threatening recording, and now FBI documents on Castellano. A picture emerged. The farmer disappearances weren't just about seizing wells, but clearing territory for a money laundering and drug network. Families refusing to sell became obstacles to eliminate. A 1980 FBI report noted, Morrison Development is considered Castellano's outwardly legitimate business partner. Evidence suggests at least 3 disappearances coincided with Morrison's land expansion contracts. This matched Miguel's list of 12 families. Elias, hearing the report, shook his head. "We lived in the middle of a mafia campaign, and no one noticed. People believed in sandstorms, while authorities pocketed cash." Miguel contacted a retired FBI agent who worked the Castellano case. He confirmed, "We knew Morrison was involved, but lacked evidence. Witnesses were silenced. Some died suspiciously. Castellano had lawyers and officials in his pocket. The case faded into obscurity." This information clarified the crime's motive and expanded its scope from a few wells to a cross-state mafia network. Castellano laundered drug money through Mojave real estate, while Morrison used local power to shield and legitimize operations. Miguel wrote in his investigation report, "The California Mafia used Mojave as a tool. Farming families became victims when they owned resources. Morrison and Castellano needed to conceal operations." The FBI documents, Elias's testimony, and the 1974 cassette showed Miguel's father's death wasn't isolated. It was part of a coordinated plan between a real estate mogul and a Los Angeles mafia boss, a dark alliance that turned Mojave into a secret graveyard for 2 decades. The FBI's confirmation of ties between Morrison and mafia boss Tony Castellano made the situation extremely dangerous. Yet Miguel received another message from the familiar anonymous number, "Want real evidence? Meet me at mile 112 rest stop, midnight tonight." The message had no name, just a crudely drawn well symbol. Elias objected, but Miguel believed this could be the only chance to reach someone inside the network. The Mojave night was quiet, wind whistling through rusted signs. The mile 112 rest stop was deserted, with only old vending machines and an abandoned restroom. Miguel parked under a flickering streetlight, scanning the area. No sign of the informant. Minutes later, an engine roared. Instead of a single vehicle, 3 black SUVs pulled up, surrounding the rest stop. Headlights blazed, casting Miguel's shadow on the concrete wall. Doors swung open, and 4 men with rifles leapt out. Without a word, they aimed directly at him. Miguel dove behind a concrete pillar as the first bullet struck the wall, kicking up white dust. One of the men shouted, "Finish him," orders from above. Miguel realized instantly, this wasn't a meeting, it was a planned ambush. Gunfire erupted, shaking the rest stop like a battlefield. Miguel scrambled behind a vending machine to dodge bullets as others tore up the ground. Just as one attacker closed in, headlights from a distance swept across. Elias in his old pickup rammed one SUV, spinning it sideways. He jumped out with a shotgun, firing a blast that forced the armed group to retreat. The gunfight was intense. Miguel pulled Elias behind the truck, both returning fire. One attacker fell, but the others quickly flanked them, pinning them down. In the chaos, a bullet struck Elias's shoulder, and he collapsed. Miguel panicked, dragged him behind a concrete wall, blood soaking his shirt. Elias gasped, his voice trembling but urgent. "Listen, well number 47. Find it." Moments later, sirens wailed. A highway patrol car approached, red and blue lights flashing. The armed group retreated, dragging their surviving allies into the SUVs and vanishing into the night, leaving behind the smell of gunpowder and scattered shell casings. As police neared, Miguel shouted for medical help. Elias was lifted onto a stretcher, his face pale but still clutching Miguel's arm. "Don't forget, well number 47. He repeated one last time before passing out. As the ambulance sirens blared, Miguel watched, heart pounding. Those final words became a new key, suggesting a specific well, possibly the final hiding place for the truth about Morrison and Castellano's network. The ambush failed to eliminate Miguel, but it sent a clear message: he was being hunted. The evidence was mounting, and those behind it were willing to use lethal force to silence anyone. But in the bloody night at the rest stop, a new clue emerged. Well number 47, potentially holding the secrets the criminal network had buried under Mojave sand for 40 years. Elias's dying words became the guide for the next step. While he lay in the ER, Miguel reopened the old well maps. On the 1972 geological map, well number 47 stood out on the southern edge of Mojave, far from main roads. Marked as an unexploited survey well, it appeared in no later records. Miguel knew if Elias gave his life to name it, this was likely the final burial site. A week later, Miguel and a discreetly hired geological survey team ventured to the area. The desert wind stung, sand swirling, but ground-penetrating radar soon detected a large anomaly 3 meters below, near the sealed mouth of well 47. The scanner showed 3 metal objects, sized like trucks. The team dug, the dry sand revealing rusted red metal. Using an excavator to clear the final layer, they uncovered the first farm truck, its cabin crumpled, doors sealed with clay. Just meters away, 2 more trucks were found, all from the 1970s. Their doors were crudely welded, deliberately sealed before burial. Opening the compartments, a foul stench poured out. Inside, dozens of human skeletons were crammed together, tattered farmers' clothing clinging to bones. Technicians counted at least 15 bodies, likely from multiple missing families. One of the three trucks held something even more significant than bones. In the glove compartment, they found a rusted metal briefcase, its lock broken. Inside was a stack of land documents, transfer contracts, bank papers, all stained with dried blood and sand. Many bore signatures, Antonio Alvarez, James Palmer, and others, but showed clear signs of forgery. On several documents, the final confirmation bore the same signature, Jack Morrison. Miguel immediately photographed and sealed the documents. This was undeniable, direct evidence that Morrison Development forged records to seize land after owners were killed. No longer just testimony or speculation. Here were physical documents with blood, bones, and contracts in the same buried truck. Police were called to the scene, but Miguel wisely alerted independent media and lawyers simultaneously. As the first cameras captured the three unearthed trucks, the community was stunned. Headlines blared, "Mass grave in Mojave. Farmers never left. They were buried." Forensic experts confirmed bone wounds showed victims were shot or bound to death before being placed in the trucks. Some child skeletons were found, proving entire families were eliminated, not just patriarchs. The plan's brutality was laid bare. No one was left alive to reclaim the land. The rusted briefcase with land documents became the final piece. Morrison personally signed the forged contracts. Blood-stained papers ruled out office copies. These were taken from victims, then legitimized by Morrison or his operatives. A technician pointed to an embossed seal on some contracts. "This is the county's official seal." Cross-checking will show collusion between Morrison and officials at the time. Miguel noted this, knowing the network was now exposed top to bottom. Corporation, police, mayor, and Castellano's mafia. The Well 47 site was sealed off for days. Each bone or personal item unearthed was filmed by media, with locals gathering, sobbing. Many surviving relatives recognized necklaces, pocket knives, or torn sweaters, the last relics of their families. In the report to the prosecutor's office, the conclusion was bolded. Well 47 holds decisive evidence proving Morrison Development's direct involvement in at least 12 Mojave farmer disappearances from 1968 to 1990. Evidence includes bodies, vehicles, and forged land documents bearing Jack Morrison's signature. From that moment, the Alvarez case was no longer a lone mystery, but the largest systematic massacre uncovered in Mojave history. The horrific discovery at Well 47 made Mojave a national focal point. Dozens of news vans camped at the desert's edge, major outlets reporting on the farmer's mass grave. Miguel knew it was time to confront local authorities. He and the community legal team decided to present evidence at a Barstow Town Council meeting, where Jack Morrison and complicit officials had wielded influence for 4 decades. On the meeting day, the hall was packed. Locals crowded in, clutching old photos of missing relatives, some holding signs reading, "Where are our families?" Tension hung heavy. On the dais, council members, including some who signed forged land contracts, sat uneasily. Miguel stepped forward, placing the rusted briefcase from Well 47 on the table. He opened it before all, pulling out blood-stained land documents and forged contracts bearing Morrison's and officials' signatures. "This is why my family's file, and at least 12 others, ended with natural accident," he said, voice clear. The hall erupted. Some officials tried to interrupt, calling the evidence unverified, but Miguel raised the cassette. He played the recording, Jack Morrison's voice, threatening his father's refusal, and the gunshot ringing out. The room fell silent, only the crackling speaker echoing. Many locals wept. Some stood shouting, "Murderer." The council descended into chaos. An elderly member tried to defend, "There's no official court ruling, this is just speculation." But then the back doors opened. 4 FBI agents entered, flashing badges. The lead agent declared, "We've verified the Well 47 site. Forensic results match the disappearances. The evidence is legally valid." The FBI's presence sparked another uproar. Locals cheered, while officials squirmed. A female reporter held up documents. "Why, for 40 years, did you let Morrison Development bribe and silence everyone?" while dozens of families vanished. No one on the dais answered. Miguel continued, I have a list of 12 families, all owning wells on the Mojave vein, all vanishing in sandstorms. This wasn't nature, it was systematic murder, and forged signatures from some of you on this council made it possible. His words left some members pale. The crowd roared for answers. A woman held up photos of her husband and son, shouting, Morrison took everything from me. You sat here covering for him for years. Chants of justice, justice, echoed through the hall. Amid the chaos, the FBI representative confirmed a federal investigation into Morrison development was underway, also examining past sheriffs and mayors. The announcement was the tipping point. Several officials fled their seats, dodging the outrage. Some tried to deny involvement, but jeers drowned them out. As the meeting ended, images spread nationwide, a small Mojave town finally facing the truth. Locals realized the Sand Swallows people stories were a cover. Their parents, siblings, and children were killed for wells, and the mastermind's name was finally public, Jack Morrison. The chaotic Barstow Council meeting paved the way for a bigger step. All evidence was transferred to federal court. 3 months later, the case was docketed in Los Angeles federal court with a 600-page indictment charging Jack Morrison and 7 accomplices, former officials, a sheriff, and 2 Morrison development employees, with mass murder, conspiracy, document forgery, and federal money laundering. On the trial's opening day, media swarmed. Images of Morrison, now 81, walking with a cane in a gray suit, still defiant, filled news channels. He sat at the defendant's table, backed by a robust legal team. Opposite him were hundreds of victims' relatives, clutching photos, filling the gallery. The federal prosecutor began by playing the cassette found in the Alvarez family's belongings. The courtroom fell silent as Miguel's father's voice refused to sign over the well, followed by Morrison's threats and the piercing gunshot. A woman in the gallery sobbed loudly, her cries overpowering the speaker. The prosecutor faced the jury. This wasn't nature, not sand swallowing people. This was human crime, and the perpetrator sits here. Next, Jensen, Morrison Development's former accountant, took the stand, detailing the leaked financial ledgers. He pointed to security fees paid to the sheriff from 1975 to 1982 and mysterious investments matching family disappearances. The ledgers were projected on a large screen, Morrison's handwritten entries clear. Elias Monroe, weakened by his ambush injury, appeared in a wheelchair to testify. He recounted hearing gunshots and a truck, leaving the Alvarez ranch in the 1974 sandstorm, reporting it to police, only to be ignored. His testimony, paired with his notebook logging Morrison's well negotiations, was a key piece. The defense countered aggressively, claiming the cassette could be doctored, the ledgers mere drafts, and Elias not a direct witness. But the prosecution was prepared. Audio forensic experts confirmed the tape's authenticity, handwriting analysis proved contract forgeries, and a 1980 FBI report verified Castellano's investments in Mojave through Morrison Development. Throughout the trial, Morrison interrupted repeatedly. He smirked when Well 47 was mentioned, even telling the jury, "Without me, Mojave would have died of thirst. I turned desert into livable land. Those people vanished because they couldn't survive here. I did what was needed for progress." His cold defense sparked courtroom outrage. The 8-week trial featured over 60 witnesses and thousands of document pages. Media dubbed it the Mojave Farmers' Trial, comparing it to California's biggest mafia cases. As the prosecution closed, they showed images of skeletons from the 3 trucks at Well 47, alongside personal items, a cracked porcelain doll, a singed photo album, a torn sweater. No one in the courtroom doubted the disappearance's nature. On verdict day, the jury deliberated for 6 hours, finding Morrison guilty on all 27 counts, including murder, conspiracy, federal document forgery, and money laundering. 6 accomplices were convicted on varying charges. The judge sentenced Morrison to life without parole, plus civil restitution for victims' families. As the courtroom erupted, Miguel clutched the cassette, the evidence that redeemed his family's truth. but joy mixed with loss. Elias, his companion from the start, didn't live to hear the verdict, passing away in the hospital a day earlier, after weeks battling his ambush wound. An FBI press release called it one of the most significant victories against organized crime in California in 4 decades. Mojave's people heard justice speak over the wind and sand. But for Miguel, the cost of justice wasn't measured in Morrison's prison years, but in the lives lost and companions no longer by his side. The federal trial ended with Morrison's life sentence, but its aftershocks lingered across Mojave. Weeks after the verdict, Barstow held a solemn memorial for all farming families lost from 1968 to 1990. A large stage was set in the town square, with hundreds bringing flowers, old photos and items recovered from Well 47. The atmosphere was solemn, mixed with tears held for justice over 4 decades. Before federal officials, the FBI, and a large crowd, a black stone monument inscribed, "The Shadows of Mojave," was placed by the town's central well. It listed each family: Alvarez, Palmer, Hartley, Ortega, Ramirez, and more. Beneath each name was their disappearance year, no longer deemed natural accidents, but victims of a criminal conspiracy. As the covering cloth was lifted, applause mixed with sobs echoed across the square. Miguel stood silently before the monument. Placing a white rose, he spoke briefly. "My father and everyone here are no longer called runaways. They've returned in truth and justice." His words brought the crowd to tears, embracing as if shedding a generational burden. During the memorial, FBI teams continued excavating Mojave sites. New findings shocked beyond Well 47. At least 5 other locations held buried trucks. 2 were confirmed as belonging to the Ortega and Ramirez families, lost in the 1970s and 1980s. These discoveries proved the disappearance chain extended beyond the known 12 families, possibly more. An FBI officer stated, "Mojave is a vast desert. We believe this is just the tip of the iceberg." National media kept reporting, calling it the Mojave Massacre, California's largest hidden slaughter in modern history. Investigative journals detailed how Morrison development used sandstorms and the sand swallows people legend to legitimize deaths. TV repeatedly aired the cassette of Morrison threatening Miguel's father, proof the desert wasn't the killer, humans were. Post-memorial, Barstow established the Legacy 47 Fund to support victims' descendants and sustain excavations for truth. Funded by the federal government and nationwide donations, it awarded scholarships named after victims to Mojave students, ensuring future generations knew their ancestors' lives were taken by greed, but truth would never stay buried. Miguel, now a figurehead for Mojave's farming community, appeared in documentaries. Asked if he still believed the desert swallows people story, he gave a bitter smile. The desert didn't swallow anyone, people exploited it. But now, no one believes that anymore. Yet, wounds don't heal easily. Many lived with haunting memories of lost kin. A young woman, a Palmer family granddaughter, told cameras, "We grew up thinking our grandparents abandoned us. But they were murdered and buried in the sand. Justice came late, but at least we know." In a final report to Congress, the FBI vowed to pursue remaining links, especially Morrison Development's ties to Los Angeles Mafia. Sweeping raids followed, with many of Morrison's assets seized and auctioned, proceeds going to the victims' fund. Miguel spent much of his time traveling Mojave, meeting families, comforting them, and sharing the truth he helped uncover. He always carried a cassette copy, the tape that survived 40 years of dust, as proof of his words. The memorial ended with a minute of silence. As the church bell tolled, hundreds held hands by the Shadows of Mojave monument. Afternoon sun glinted on the inscription. They didn't vanish, they were taken. And now their truth is restored. The Shadows of Mojave story didn't just close a historic case, but raised questions for today's America. Over 4 decades, numerous farming families were murdered, their trucks and bodies buried under desert sand. Yet the truth was hidden by forged contracts. Security fees paid to sheriffs and silence bought with $500 monthly checks, as with widow Beth Briggs. This reminds us that when economic and political power collude, the voiceless can be erased easily. Today in the U.S., debates over resource control, freshwater farmland, energy, remain relevant. The Morrison case shows how corruption and vested interests can lead local governments to abandon citizens, legitimizing wrongs with forged records. The lesson is clear: we must demand transparency in land contracts, political funding, and ties between businesses and officials. Otherwise, history could repeat in new forms. Miguel's discovery of the old cassette capturing Morrison's threats and gunshot also underscores the value of preserving evidence, however small, to later unlock justice. In today's era of misinformation and fake news, retaining truth, a recording, a document, can shift the tide. Finally, the Shadows of Mojave Monument reminds us that justice may come late, but never arrives, if communities stay silent. Americans today must remember truth endures only when we relentlessly demand it, and justice is served only when silence is no longer an answer. If you find the Shadows of Mojave story and its 4-decade journey to uncover truth thought-provoking, please subscribe to join us in exploring more secrets buried by time. Thank you for joining us, and see you in the next video with another chilling case still shrouded in mystery.